Today, we're going to talk about something that is not necessarily procurement or procure tech related. It's kind of just relevant to all people who have a boss, which is most of us. But before we do, Dr. Elouise, you were mentioning before we were jumping on that you have a rant, and I'm in a rant mood. So have at it.
Uh, it's a mini rant, but for the first time, and I knew it was coming, I saw it today that somebody was talking about AI transformations, and I am not ready for that. And by the way, we are so far away from this idea, and if we're out there, whomever is selling this idea of an AI transformation, like take take a step back, not out like 84%, and I argue the number's higher. 84% of digital transformations fail. We haven't done digital yet. Why do we think we're just going to jump into AI? Not cool, people.
Do
Let's
we
just
think person, firm, however you saw this, do you think it was a messaging mishap and they meant to say AI implementations or AI training versus transformation?
no. This was not a mistake. This was trying to get ahead of the next big thing, and I'm not having it. It was a messaging thing, all right, but not a mistake. It was deliberate, and I'm not having it.
So
We
did
are
you reach
nowhere
out?
near ready.
I'd love to see your note or your message to this person or team.
Well, I didn't respond because A, I knew I'd do a rant here, but also it's not worth it to disparage people. Like if they're delusional enough to start using these terms, they don't want to be corrected. Let's just say I've learned that the hard way over 25 years in consulting.
So the dual source title here, we don't want to cause a debate with this person. Okay.
Not as of yet, but I mean, it's kind of one of these things. So remember at the end of 2024, I called it and said that going into 2025, the most overused term is going to be agentic workforce. And I mean, what are we barely in February? And that's all I hear. It's all I hear. It's all I see on LinkedIn. And and so like of course AI transformations is going to be the next big buzzword, and I'm not ready, and I can't bring myself to be ready, but also like we're nowhere near ready to have that discussion, or more problematically, we're not ready to deliver that kind of work.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that um I have not been on LinkedIn as much as I have been historically. So I have not seen in my limited time on social and the reading I've done, I've not yet seen that phrase or companies marketing that. But if one person's done it, I'm assuming we're going to see more people following here.
Yeah, and I mean, like in 10 years, sure. In 5 years, sure. Or if you are X Facebook, a digitally native company that's already like your product is built around AI, then I'm like you're not really transforming, you're just evolving. Salesforce, same thing. You're evolving into an AI company, but like but that's not what, like when this term is used, AI transformation, and just like digital transformation, it was sort of like it was sold. And by the way, I watched this, I participated in this, so I'm not saying I didn't make this mistake, but you kind of go to a big old school company that's been around for 100 years, and you sort of talk up Google and Netflix, and you want to be like them, and you get them all excited, and you're going to make them a data driven company or an analytics driven company or a digital driven company. And what you're doing is promising them to be like the Facebooks or Googles and whatnot of the world. And it's just that after many years of reflection, that actually is it's not what we should be selling. And I fear and I suspect we're just going to walk right into the next mistake and just trade out digital transformation for AI transformation. And I'm not having it.
So maybe some time this year we'll have to get this person or someone from this team on our show. We can do a live debate.
It's just as long as it's not in person.
Yeah. All right. So good bosses. So I think it also might be interesting for our readers to talk a little bit about our journeys with bosses. So I'm happy to share kind of what my story and background looks like. So I have only had one female boss my entire career. So I'm 41. So I've been in the workforce, 20 something years, let's say 20 years, and spent most of my career in the procurement space, in the marketing procurement world, heavy focus originally in print and promo and packaging, which, if you've worked in that part of the procurement space, it is was at least, I should say, very, very male driven and very male dominated, especially a lot of the organizations were quote manufacturers that morphed into technology companies. So having a manufacturing plant, running equipment, actually doing production, doing warehousing and fulfillment, and then also having a technology arm just lended itself more to having a lot of male employees and a male leadership. So how I started my career, which was total random happen chance, I think I just fell into a world where there was not a lot of female leaders in the space at the time. So I want to just throw that out there that all my bosses until now, until I pivot actually out of procurement into IT and the IT asset management world, have been male. So I've heard, stories from friends who have said, "Oh, I hate having female bosses. They're catty, they're gossipy, it's a nightmare." Don't have that experience, not something I'm going to get into and talk about. But again, current female boss is fabulous and incredible, but I'm sharing from a little bit different lens and perspective of being a female working for men. So my first boss, and shout out to John Suey, someone who took just an incredible risk on me. I was a senior in college, had absolutely no interest in going into procurement or supply chain. I actually tried to not go work in the field and was planning to turn that opportunity down and do something else, but fell in love with the people and saw that I had an opportunity to make a really big impact and learn a ton. So he- um don't have, I mean, just incredible things to say about him as my first boss. Now, he was also someone who was considered pretty young and modern and hip in a industry that I would say was much more old school, where the average age of most leaders was 55, 60 plus. He was definitely on the younger side, and so I think he had a vision to bring in younger, curious, energetic people to kind of reinvigorate the industry and bring more technology and innovation to a more traditional to a more traditional field. So I think that kind of lended itself well to, and then through as I advanced in my career, the company that I started at where John hired me was acquired by a larger organization. So I was there for over 12 years, which now kind of seems crazy to be at the same company for 12 years, was the same company, different name, very different leadership. Then I went on to work and help launch two startups in the marketing procurement tech space. Both of them, again, male owners, male leaders. And so just a very interesting career path and interesting structure. And then had the incredible opportunity to work for a legend and someone who's an incredible force from the procurement space. So again, I don't have a lot of those, oh my gosh, working for women is awful type experiences. I had pretty good experiences working for male leaders. So a little bit about my background. We'll pivot into yours, Dr. Elouise, and then I have a lot of notes on things that I've learned throughout my career and picked up from what I would consider to be a good or great boss.
Yeah, and I want to bookmark or foreshadow something is the female bosses thing. We're going to do a special episode with some guest speakers or guest some friends of the show in a couple weeks, maybe a month. I don't know. Anyway, when we do that, I think we want to tackle that topic.
Yeah,
It's
first week
it's
of March because some of them I think have had, at least compared to me, much more exposure and experience working for female bosses.
Yeah, and that's a topic that kind of ripples under the current, but doesn't always get addressed as publicly as or sort of anyway. Yeah, mine. I mean, I've been with Carney almost at 25 years. 25 years in March.
Which
So
again is
I mean,
crazy.
June. Yeah, I know it's totally crazy. Like, what am I doing? I mean, like anyway. Yeah, June, I should say. So like right around the corner. I never. Anyway. Um, so I haven't had as many bosses
Right.
myself. I had a couple early on that I want to talk about that were really influential, and and like you, there's a lot for me to sort of lessons I learned along the way and sort of do's and don'ts maybe, but by and large, I had kind of two bosses before I moved to into sort of tech world and then Carney for 25 years. So I don't have a broad breadth, but the bosses I've had have, let's just say, left a significant impression.
Yeah, but I would say similar story here. I haven't worked for that many companies, and I think every boss I've had has had a big impact on me in some way. Not all my bosses have been great or even good, but they've definitely left an impact. But do feel very blessed to have worked for and currently do work for some incredible leaders. And so today we're going to dive in and talk about what does make a good or great boss. And I think this is really, really, I wish looking back, someone had sat me down when I was in my 20s and taught me some of these things. I feel like I kind of was a learn by fire. So as I
Yes.
advanced my career, I just moved up into leadership positions. I would say I never really had formal leadership training. It wasn't like I had practice or some great leadership mentor experience. I really was someone who was learning from my bosses or previous leaders I've had and then implementing the things that I thought they did well and learning from things that I thought could have been changed. But this is for those listening to the show that are early on in their careers, or if you are really wanting to move up in more of a management role. I think some of these can be really useful and impactful.
By the way, I had the same thing of like nobody, and actually, I mean, because I'm even older, and there really wasn't
Yeah.
that mentorship. That mentorship seems to be much more prevalent across the board. I suspect people of my generation, if you went to business school, you majored in business or got an MBA, you got more of that. But I didn't get any of that. So it was just kind of trial by fire and just figuring it out. So I do think there is a generational change, whereas now you and I see it in like we mentor, like we make ourselves available to younger folks in the profession. So I definitely think it's much more the dynamic has changed and the information's out there at our fingertips if you want to get it.
Mhm. All right, let's start with your first lesson or learning that you want to share.
So mine's a double because it came from the same manager or the same boss, and his name's Bob Clem. And for those that so shout out to Bob. He so if you go back to the episode where we talked about make or break career moments, he's the guy that hired me at Oakland Ballet, and he there's a number of things, many things that he did great, but there's two that I have carried with me as a manager myself, And they're just two principles that just like they're the most important principles. And number one, and by far and away number one, if I were to weight them, well, number one is take care of your people. And that really influenced how I became a manager, is in watching Bob take care of his people, which included me. And it's the one lesson that above all that I just realized, because then when I walk into situations, I can always see bad bosses because they're hanging their people out to dry. And when I was a manager, I would make myself essentially, and this has become the sort of term, the employees, you work for the employees, not the other way around. And I think, again, going back to that generational, when I came into the workforce, it was always the boss top down, and we're all minions reporting to the boss. And Bob really helped me see that no matter what, you got to take care of your people, whether it's, like interfacing with, the senior leadership, or doing whatever, whatever it takes, buying them lunch, keeping them motivated, listening to them, being kind to them. I think ultimately everything I say for the rest of this episode really will tie back to taking care of your people. And I just got to give you one anecdote, because it is sort of a theater reference, but it's so quintessential to Bob's character. And this gets to, I was young when I was working for Oakland Ballet, and I
When
was
you say young, what was this, like, early 20s?
oh yeah, it was 1994. So how old was I then? I don't know, but yeah, early 20s.
So, like, first big person job out of college?
Totally. And so we were going on our first tour. So I, in the previous episode, I talked about Romeo and Juliet and like this make or break moment. So we got through that, and then we took the show on the road in the spring, and at our first stop, it was a three-act ballet. I was stage managing, and like we did the first act, and the curtain comes down, and I see the artistic director walking across. He's on the other side of the stage, walking towards me, and I'm thinking, I thought it went well. Like it was this moving so fast. So like, what did I know? I was just sort of overwhelmed in the moment, but it seemed to go okay. And so I thought the artistic director was coming over to compliment me and tell me what a good job I was doing. And Bob met him halfway across the stage and sort of like ushered him, away from me. And as I watched, I realized that the artistic director was not happy, and he started gesticulating towards me, and he was pissed. And I don't even know what I did. I'm still, or but what Bob did is he saw that situation, and that, getting a tongue lashing in the middle of a show would not have, especially when I was that young, would not have done well.
Yeah.
And so Bob, like, just taking care of me and taking care of people, he sort of saw that. He
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 was
knew
your
it.
he was your deflector.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's that kind of thing that always like stuck out, and that I've always sought in my sort. It just like that more than anything influenced how I became a manager too. So that's
Okay,
my number one. How about you?
okay. So I'll start with 2 of mine. They kind of are connected as well. So I prefer bosses that are brutally honest.
That's one. Okay, that's going to be one of mine. But we'll go. Yeah.
So I feel like if you don't tell me and I keep doing it, I'm not going to know that something's wrong, or that I could be doing something better, or I've upset someone. So tell me right away and just lay it out there. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't try to be super nice about it. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be a complete jerk, but address it immediately and be honest about it. Get it out there, and then I can learn from it and grow and improve. And I've had bosses that do that. And the reason why I've mentioned this, I've also had a boss that would either never give feedback. So, how do you ever know if you're in line with outcomes, goals, the team culture, etc., or in a one-to-one like a month later.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I've been doing that for the last 6 weeks. Why didn't you tell me immediately?
Yeah.
So I have great respect for the bosses that I've had and the boss that I currently have that is very, very direct with feedback.
Yep.
And the big part of that is um, being timely. Like, call me, text me, do it immediately or as immediately as possible. The second big one for me is maintaining a low tolerance for underperformance.
Mm.
And I feel like this is particularly important because I've primarily worked at startups or smaller companies that are in the 10 to 150 employee range. So very, very small teams, small organizations, nothing like a Kearney where there's thousands of employees globally. And if you have somebody on the team who is underperforming, it is brutally on it. It's really, really obvious really quickly. There's not a lot of places to hide. And what I've learned from my good bosses is they don't tolerate that underperformance. So it's identified, there's an issue, the under whatever it is that person is spoken to. Sometimes it's very solvable and fixable. And with some coaching, that person can come around and even excel. And sometimes it's not. And it means that person is not in the right environment and maybe doesn't belong at the organization. But if you don't do something about it, you're going to really frustrate your top performers. And I've actually seen it at a company that I worked at where we lost a couple exceptional performers because leadership had underperformers on the team and didn't do anything about it. And so, big notice for me, and this was when I was in my 20s. I mean, I literally had Post-it notes on my desk at home when I was, making notes about leadership, and that was a really big one for me.
Yeah, underperformers can be the worst. It's interesting in consulting, it's very much up or out. So you tend not to get a lot of that because the underperformers, even the decent performers, kind of get matriculated out. But yeah, I totally get it. You can, I mean, it just takes sort of that one bad apple, and we, yeah, in early in my career, there was a couple of folks that were intransigent and just difficult, and it just kills morale. I want to come back to the feedback because that was my number.
Brutally honest feedback.
Brutally honest
We
feedback.
throw the important part in.
Brutally honest feedback. So that was on my list as number three, and sort of it's a good and a bad. So I'll just tackle that one now. And we did a whole episode on this. Brutally honest feedback is a gift. I can I cannot emphasize that enough. Brutally honest feedback is a gift, and I that's why when I talk to all these founders and startups, I ask them. They show me their stuff. I ask them, "What kind of feedback do you want?" And I think every time they or just give me the brutally honest feedback. And while that's not a manager or employee relationship, I do I have had managers that showed me brutally honest feedback, and that helped me grow more than anything. Now, they weren't so kind about it. I forget the words you used, but
You may have
so
shed some tears.
perhaps, or just like, yeah, my psyche was not ready for that, and there were some cultural issues, but certainly I took, let's just say I took a beating in my psyche took a beating, but it made me better. So take that for what it's worth. But I do think the honest feedback, if delivered properly, because like you, it's like, oh, great. I've made this mistake for a year, and
Yeah.
you're now just telling me at my annual review. It's like, good Lord, like what? Don't I look like a
Yeah,
jerk?
to all the people or the things that you've executed and you had no idea.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're like embarrassed and like, ah. So yeah, so timely, brutally honest feedback. So I'm with you on that one.
Okay. So, next one for me is embraces flexibility and adaptability. So, I had a boss who was, um, let's say, extremely set in his ways. Now, whether age plays a role or not, I don't know. He was late 60s. So, definitely very different generation, very different career, very different upbringing, had spent most of his career working at one large company. Not a traditional startup guy. And I had a really tough time with somebody who had in their mind how everything was supposed to be done, and that was the only way.
Yeah.
And me being somebody who was, 40 years younger, I was brought up in a different environment, in a different world, and in a different way of doing things. And so I really, really struggled. Like, why would I do that when it takes 2 hours when I can do it this way and it takes 5 minutes?
Yeah.
And so I have come to appreciate bosses like my current boss, who is all about being flexible and agile and adapting with the times. And I think in the age of AI, this is going to be a critical skill for leaders is you're going to have to be able to change and adapt extremely quickly, like by the hour, by the day, and be open to your team coming with new ideas, new ways of doing things, new processes, because just because you've always done it doesn't mean it's going to be the best way moving forward. And if you are too stuck in your ways, one, your top talents see ya, they're out the door, and your competitors are going to race by you because they're going to be allowing their employees to have all this flexibility. Now, I will say it doesn't mean I don't mean be sloppy and lazy, right? There's a difference with what I'm saying, but it just be open-minded and be flexible. The world is changing really fast and you just need to be open to that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a generational thing. And I talk about this, or a generational change. I talk about this in my presentations now, because you can't, as an older person, the world has changed so dramatically that everything we learned 20, 30 plus years ago is not relevant or not as relevant in this day and age. That does not mean that those of us that are older don't have value. It's just that we have to recognize the value millennials, Gen Z, and eventually Gen Alpha will bring to these intractable problems, and or even just the difficult problems. And well, baby boomers take, let's just take technology and digital for a second. They just take it for granted that no matter how terrible the interface is,
Mhm.
that's what the corporation bought. We're going to use it. We're going to make the most of it. And even if it just limits our
You
productivity.
mean the 30-year-old legacy ERP? That's
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. The big ERP, which hasn't changed since the 90s. But anyway, we don't need another Elouise rant right now. But um, but Gen Xers are kind of like, we see the fallacy of that, and yet we still use the same silly interfaces. But more and more millennials have come around. They've developed workarounds. They're much more fluent in the technology, and increasingly the Gen Z are coming in with AI or AI fluency, and just like, let's get this little agent to do this or whatever. And so as managers, and being over 40 or 50, you have to be sort of looking at this thinking, well, I got to be open because what those youngins are doing outstrips my ability to even just understand it. And again, so then as a manager, your job changes to not control, and just like you used your example, I forgot the guy's name, but to allow the flexibility. But the world is vastly different now, and businesses are vastly different.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I would say there's probably 5-year-olds that are better on a phone than me.
Oh, no doubt. I mean,
And so one day, one of those people might be on my team, and how I manage that person is very different than somebody my mom's age.
oh yeah. I mean, I have trouble like using my iPhone or typing on my iPhone. Not that it's a problem, it's just I hate it because I want the bigger screen, the bigger interface, whether it's my iPad or my laptop or ideally my big screen, because it's just easier on my eyes. But like I watch many millennials just like plunking away on their phone, and like the Gen Z, the like 5-year-old or fifth graders, like they're like have no problem with any of
Oh, like
this.
it's like lightning speed.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like just and so for me it's like just acknowledge that for what it is, admire it, and then I'm going to go about my business the same way I do my thing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, here's one that really stands out for my current boss. So this is very new and relevant for me. And it's champions the bigger picture.
Hmm.
So something that I struggle with a lot is organizing my time, because I'm used to working at startups where it's like I'm a team of 1 or 2 or 3. So it's not like I've had companies where there's large teams where I can do a lot of delegation. And so I struggle with, even today, I'm working definitely for a larger company than I have in the past, where there are resources and there are people and there are teams to help out and support, is kind of juggling and managing my time. And what I so appreciate about my current boss is that she helps me connect what I'm working on with the organization's goals. So, understanding the bigger picture for the company. So, here's our revenue targets. Here's where we're going. Here's what we're building, and then helps me prioritize what I'm working on, because I want to work on the highest impact activities that are going to impact revenue, for some of the smaller stuff that I might have historically just focused on and done, but they don't matter as much. So just helping me align what I'm working on with the actual business outcomes and goals for the organization. So because I've seen that modeled so well, I'm really working on and trying to do that with my team. Here's the big
So
picture, and then helping us all kind of work on those things to get to that whatever that is that we're going towards.
so we're going to name your current boss or
I
let
don't
your
know.
because
She's a
she
listener of
is,
the show, so
what's that?
she's a listener of the show, so we'll give a shout out to Donna.
But she is a legend in the procure tech space.
Yes.
So she in her own right is very very accomplished and somebody I admire. Not as a manager or managee, just as somebody I greatly respect. So shout out to Donna.
But I have not always worked for leaders that have done that.
Yeah,
Hence me struggling with trying to organize my priorities and time. And it really, really helps your team if you give them the vision and
yeah,
tie whatever it is that you're doing to the business outcomes for the goal that for the company that year.
yeah. All right. So my next one is getting the right tools for the job. And this gets back to taking care of your employees. But one of the first things, again, back to Bob, he taught this lesson of don't make people try to like work around. Like if you have to hammer in a nail, don't give them a screwdriver, don't give them a brick, get them a hammer. And it's so simple, but get them the right tools for the job. And in this digital age, and I've carried through this lesson because I see this all the time in corporations. Corporations bought this tool, big ERP or whatever BI tool or whatever database. It's like, but I watch people fail at using these tools, and so I just can't wrap my head around not giving people the right tools. And this is really the important thing, and it's true in my personal life. So if I have to go fix a clogged sink, or not that I can do that, but the sprinklers, you just get the right tool for the job, because there's nothing worse than trying to cobble a workaround when you just use the right tool for the job. And so part of my digital literacy and advocacy is getting people the right job, because you're not going to innovate in PowerPoint, you're not going to innovate in an ERP system. Whatever you do, your job is to get people the right tools for their job as a manager.
And what I read between the lines with that is that you need to be really in tune and a good listener,
Hmm.
because your team is not always going to come to you and say, I need these things. But they may be struggling or having challenges. And if you really listen to the problem and what you're trying to solve, you can read between the lines and figure out maybe there's some resources or tools. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. There's a lot of free resources out there as well. So that it to me, that good listening ties into that.
Yeah, it was a great point.
All right. Um, Pushes me beyond my comfort zone. So I I guess in one sense I've been very lucky that when you do work at smaller organizations or startups, you're kind of pushed beyond your comfort zone a lot because you don't have a lot of people to do things. So you got to figure it out. That needs to be done. I'm going to go research. I'm going to figure with AI, it's a lot easier to do, right? I can go in ChatGPT and type up a brief or pull research or do things that I need to do very, very quickly. But what I very much appreciate about my current boss and a previous boss that I've had is they intentionally had me be involved in projects where they knew it was something that I wasn't going to be super comfortable with.
Yes.
And I very much in the time I may be stressing out, I may have shed a few tears, worked some long hours, had some weekend stress. But when I reflect back, I am so appreciative for those opportunities because it's given me incredible skills and things that I wouldn't just be able to learn doing my day-to-day job. And so it's something that as a leader, I'm really trying to focus on and prioritize for my team. How can I pass that same opportunity? How can I also um, give those same opportunities and learnings to my team? So, very, very, very important.
Yeah, and I think that gets to, I'll just add to that's it's the opportunity creation, and giving folks the opportunity to grow into, expand their role, and do different things, versus I'm putting you in a box and you do great in that box, but I'm not going to let you out of that box. As a manager, that's easy to fall into that trap.
Mhm. All right.
Okay.
What's
So
your do you have a couple more?
I have two more.
Okay.
And so and this one's a simple one, but it was one of those things you pick up along the way, and it makes total sense. But until you sort of call it out, it's like you realize you can get caught in this trap. Is never criticize somebody publicly. Like if they mess up, if they do something wrong, take them aside. Don't humiliate them in front of other people. And this gets to when you're on big teams, when you're in big environments, because oftentimes like mistakes will happen, especially in big group environments, and everybody knows there's a mistake. And my default try that again. My default is to say, "Hey, my fault as the manager, and we'll fix it later. We'll fix it. We'll figure out there's something better I can do." And then I'll go back behind, afterwards privately, and talk to the person. And you'll see this in sports a lot. Like you'll see it good and bad if you if you scroll TikTok or if you like a lot of times when you see press conferences of some of these elite athletes, they're very they take a lot of it on or all of it on themselves. They're the first to critique, and also the coaches. And it is kind of interesting to see from a leadership point of view those that do take responsibility first and foremost. And a lot of that's come out with the playoff games where like sometimes refs get blamed or this or that, but also listen to the coaches and the players. They say we didn't lose it on one call with the ref, and sort of talking about that and taking ownership. And so but despite the fact everybody can see that so and so dropped the ball or so and so, something happened, and instead of publicly calling them out, actually just taking ownership for your part as the leader, as the boss. So that's an important one. And I'll just give you the flip side because I had a boss that used to, I don't know if I've said it on here before, but used to humiliate me in front of my team. And that was as a way to teach me. And it took me years to figure out that's what was happening. And once I figured that out, then I could learn the lessons. But it was very, very unpleasant, and I had no idea what was happening.
Lesson on what not to do, right? Some of the our biggest learnings are when we have things that we don't love about our bosses or that we think aren't done correctly. So you check that box with that one.
And we might do a bad bosses episode. That will definitely end up there, but oi,
Yeah.
that was rough, a rough part of my career until I figured that out. And there's been many years in there between the ones that would just give me brutally honest feedback, sort of like thumping me over the head, and then the one that would just humiliate me.
Mhm. All right. Next one for me is encourage varying viewpoints. Don't hire yes people.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most important skill sets in hiring is hiring people that are curious and that have their own opinion and are able to look at something, assess, and have a viewpoint. And it doesn't always need to be the same as you. And I appreciate bosses that I've had and my current boss who encourage people to come with different ideas and not we're not going to just do this again because we've always done it, or here's an idea or thought, what do you think about it? And it's actually helped me really hire people that question things and don't just go with the status quo. And I think the strongest teams that I've worked on have not been filled with yes people. And I appreciate my current boss and in particular a previous boss that I had that I think did an exceptional job at this.
Love that. Well, that leads me to my last one, which is related, is trust your employees. And if you can't trust your employees, you don't have the right team. And I very much like to just let people go. And again, if they make mistakes, we can correct them. But I do not like to me, the scourge of bad leadership is micromanaging. And micromanaging is really, I don't trust you, so I'm going to stand over you and make sure you do the right thing. And so, trust. If you can't trust your employees, find somebody else because, or find another team or find another job, because if you can't trust them to do their job without you micromanaging them, then there's really no point. And it's miserable for you and it's miserable for them. So trust your employees.
All right, my last one is clear and consistent communication.
Mm.
Tell me what you want, don't skate or skirt around it. Don't write me a two-page response, tell me in one or two lines. Or if you're going to speak with me on a Zoom or on a phone call, Tell me exactly what it is that you want, or have clear communication. I cannot, one of my pet peeves is, sitting on a call for 30 minutes and then leaving and having no idea what the point or purpose of the call was, because there wasn't clear and consistent communication. So I appreciate from my current boss, short to the point, here's the feedback, or here's what it is, here's what we want to accomplish, get to it, right? We don't need to waste a bunch of time. And I think that's really important as you're a leader and managing people. If you don't clearly communicate with your team, there's going to be uncertainty, and there's going to be wasted work and a lot of confusion. So for me, clear and consistent communication also means short and direct and to the point. That can be inferred different ways to different people, but don't waste my time. Don't have a meeting just to have a meeting. If you're going to message me, fine, but be short and have a point.
Yeah, if for those of you looking to go into consulting or professional services, there is a slight nuance there in that a lot of the meetings are, shall we say, egalitarian. So they're not top-down driven, and communication can wander, especially as you get into more senior meetings with many folks, because by design, consulting is very built around camaraderie and ideally exchange of ideas. And that's actually what makes it compelling. But also, you can have meetings that wander, or that, like, I've been in 4-hour meetings where the first hour was just spent debating data efficacy of, like, all the leads and proposals, or just the client, as like nobody can agree on the data, and just because you
But
have a room full of smart people. But yeah.
But I would argue to the topic, as a boss, you can have clear and consistent communication, um, outside of, right, big meetings or some things that are a little bit out of your control. But the way that you interact directly with your team, I think you absolutely can control that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Alrighty, so I think that wraps up both of our lists. If you have some additional thoughts on a great boss that you want to shout out, or some things that you've learned from a great boss, or if you think you're an awesome boss, and why you've been able to be such a strong leader, drop us a note in the comments. If you're not subscribed to us on YouTube, please do so. And with that, we will be back next Wednesday.